Thanks very much indeed. I work for a chemistry-based organisation. I'll tell you a bit more about that in a minute. By training, I'm a chemist, albeit quite a long time ago, but by interest, by passion, I am a developer. I'm really interested in releasing software, getting new functionality to users to help users solve problems. And I've been coming along to meetings like this for several years, sitting there thinking, how are we ever going to get started? Hearing people talking about major transformations. And this is about the start of our journey and what we've learned along the way, which I hope might be of use to at least some of you here or might spark some ideas. Very briefly, the organisation I work for is 50 years old, the database we produce. It's really amazing. We were really one of at the forefront of large-scale computing in the very early days in Cambridge. We collect a particular kind of scientific data, and we make it available with some pretty impressive search and analysis and visualization tools as well. Give you a little bit more context. Scientists around the world take molecules of interest, grow them into crystal structures, zap them with X-rays or neutrons. From that they get data, and we're the worldwide repository for small molecule data that's then used in very powerful ways for understanding chemistry. We like to say every single new drug, new medicine of interest over the last 30 years, in some part or other, owes its existence to our data or our software. It really is a valuable resource. Part of the thing about being a 50-year-old organisation and being at the forefront, though, is you end up with quite a lot of legacy. And some of that decades-old Fortran is my legacy. I've been there since 1987. Yeah, do the maths, it's scary. But I want to assure you that we do have lots of more modern code as well. Many of our teams really understand writing well-tested code, testing as they go. We've really invested in Agile over 4 or 5 years, something like that. But we have lots of legacy build and release tools and scripts as well. And before the transformation I'm talking about, I can honestly say nobody could remember the last time we had a green build. I can also say that back in the late 1980s or early 1990s, we did have continuous integration. I wrote some scripts that when you push some code via RCS, it was built. Unfortunately, there's been layer upon layer upon layer of that over the years. And a probably inevitable consequence of that is we manage 1 release a year of our desktop applications. And we keep making the mechanisms more efficient, but the number of mechanisms keeps growing. We get more developers, we do more things, we get faster at doing more things. We've just, about a week ago, released this year's release, and the elapsed time was somewhere between 3 or 4 months, and for a lot of that time we had between 6 and 8 developers across several teams working on it. Lots of manual effort. Lots of stuff is automated. The automated stuff runs nightly. People do have applications they can run every morning. That's great. But the actual getting it out of the door is the really time-consuming bit. So there is a widely held belief, which is we simply can't release more often than once a year. I know lots of you sitting here will know about transformations where that's been changed. But from my perspective, that's great. But how do I persuade other people at work? How do we learn how to speed things up? And every time we talked about having CI builds, lots of people said, but our builds are too slow. Our weekend builds took sort of 36, 48, sometimes 3 days. It wasn't unusual to come in on a Monday morning and Friday night's builds didn't finish until lunchtime on Monday or towards the end of the working day. I've said we very, very rarely had green builds, if ever. And we got lots and lots of warnings, so we were getting lots of good information from our compilers, but not addressing problems that we were being told about. So initially, and over the years, we've really had to write cross-platform code. We didn't have the number of people to write platform-specific code, but back in about 2010, we started investing quite heavily in Microsoft Dynamics CRM and SharePoint for an internal platform. We ended up with a dedicated C# team. They obviously didn't have the legacy that our Fortran and C++ builds had. And they went out on a very small, very good limb, picked a CI system, they picked Team City. It worked really, really well for them. And a few of us started dreaming that maybe we could use it for our C++ builds. There were sort of middle management approval. People of my sort of level thought it was a great idea. I'm not sure how hard we tried or how successful we were and indeed how relevant it was to people higher up in the organisation. But early 2014, a few of us, with support, started a very small team as a background task to try and move our C++ builds to CI. And couple of other people did some really good work on lots of complex scripts, replacing with Python and stuff like that. And then by September last year, I was really starting to think that we were close enough and the value was so huge that it was time for a bit of a push. And within a few weeks, we did actually manage to move the builds over to Team City. It took several more months before we had the confidence to turn the old builds off, but we started getting good information middle of October last year. So what happened next? It then took 2 months to get our first green build. And that was, we have continuous integration builds, nightly builds and weekly builds. And so that was even to get the continuous builds green. And obviously that wasn't people working full time on that, but you know, an hour or two a day, a few of us having another go, trying to fix another problem. But before that, we hadn't seen a green build in years. And so that's an incredible accumulation of build problems fixed. So that's looking really good. The tests, we had quite a commitment to tests. We've had a fair amount of internal training on how to write fast and effective tests, but big database, lots of regression tests. What we found through the information in Team City was the way that when you view tests, it just immediately sorts by elapsed time. We got rid of the tests that took an hour, 5 hours, 10 hours at the weekends. And really, we thought they were doing useful things, but what it showed us was they just didn't have any value. And we tried to look at those before, but it was so hard to get the data out of our awful HTML build logs. So that was fantastic. Then we started looking at the speed of build machines. So this is up to 2 days. So this is probably our weekend builds, must have been our weekend builds, day and a half. Very, very random time, and we just weren't getting reasonable, consistent build timings out of the clean build, so it was consistent code being run. And this gave us the information to go and talk to our systems team to say, these several-year-old virtual machines, but hosting our builds, is there anything we can do to speed it up? This information gave us the data to argue for a significant overhaul in our build infrastructure, significant investment. And you can see the drop there. That obviously was the point when the new machines were turned on. I think that some of these earlier failures were actually caused by the machines being too slow and long processes timing out and things like that. So the speed gave us a benefit as well. I'm really conscious that this is going back up, and some of you might be thinking, hang on, what's going on? We have some weird kind of network problem at the moment that means some things are timing out, several hour processes timing out, trying again and so on. Again, this is going to give us data to fix that problem. So it's an ongoing thing. It's never going to be finished, but it keeps on getting better. You see patterns as well, similar kind of thing. Before, you'd never remember from, say, 1 week to the next, if this is a weekly build, what the pattern was before, and it's so easy to drill down. So those were the things that, had I realised at the start how much we would have got from the data in the system, I really would have advocated a lot more strongly and a lot sooner to move to CI. I thought we were different. We were really, our code was really complex and there was so much of it. What's happened now, though, is various teams have extended the system and taken advantage of integration. So this I got from a sprint review last week. Another team, I should mention this is for a system that is only being tested internally and hasn't yet been released. But they've already got a pipeline going where if the builds succeed, then they do the tests. If the tests succeed, then they install on integration. And I'm sure they will, when they go to install on production and launch, initially that will be someone triggers a deployment, and over time, hopefully, we'll move to something more continuous. I thought maybe a few years after we had continuous integration, we might get to this stage. It's kind of 14 months on, pretty pleased with that. I learnt a new word earlier this week, radiators. That same team, someone has set up a very easy view of the status of their builds. Really nice bonus of this is that person just happens to sit outside the executive director's office. So we have really high visibility of the CI system and the benefits of it and the further improvements it's leading to. Not expecting you to read this for one moment, it's a wall of text. What this is a series of commit messages from me back end of last week. We finally have enough rapid feedback from our build systems that we've had the confidence to change our C++ builds so that the lowest 5-level libraries of many dozens now treat warnings as errors. And in a couple of days, I found 2, maybe 3 really quite significant issues that we've been getting warnings about for years. I mean, none of them are kind of showstoppers for a release or anything, but it's really nice to be able to take advantage of that and know that we're improving the code quality. One of the other teams has also included code coverage reports for their test suite, and we'll do that soon for C++ as well. So where are we now? Referring back to an earlier talk, much happier developers. It's, compared to managing cron scripts and things like that, it's so much better. Some teams have got really firm team agreements on how to handle build errors. It's fine to just go ahead and back out anyone's change. Other teams still kind of feeling their way on that. But still great to have something fixed in even a few hours compared to the weeks that it used to take us before to solve problems. Where we need more reliable infrastructure, we're getting the data for that. The act of writing this talk has prompted discussions internally to start thinking about whether it's possible for us to release more often. Now, that's not going to be a small project given what I've described, but it's astonishing to me that barely more than a year after we dared to implement CI and push it out, those discussions are happening. And they'll be business driven. If it's worth it for the business, we'll do it. But for me personally, that's really, really exciting. So finally, what about all those initial concerns? Our builds are too slow. Well, they're not. We held off doing it because the builds were too slow. Using CI enabled us to speed up both the builds and the hardware. Builds never succeed. We're nowhere near 100%, but we're getting better, and we have a lot of green builds, and it's really, really helpful. And we're taking advantage of third-party tools. And standard mechanisms for improving code quality. So my message is, if you're all in perfect worlds where you've got great code, that's great, I'm really happy for you. But if there's anything that you're thinking, if like me, if any of you are sitting here thinking, well, you know, our world isn't as perfect as other people's, just think of one small thing that you can do, anything that you can make better, particularly if it's using existing tools that you can piggyback and use plugins and things like that, and you'd be astonished at how much difference it makes and how it opens up opportunities for speeding up and speeding up. That's all I have.